Well, who was Baal, church? The god of baby sacrifice.
Hey everybody, this is pure and utter nonsense. There was no such thing as a god of baby sacrifice. Baal was a Northwest Semitic storm deity and warrior deity, just like Adonai, the God of Israel. In fact, Adonai appropriated some of the hymns that were originally dedicated to Baal that are in the Hebrew Bible. Anciently, people could sacrifice children to a variety of different deities. There was no one deity dedicated to it. People sacrificed children to Baal. People also sacrificed children to Adonai, the God of Israel, as they were explicitly commanded to do in Exodus 22, verse 29. And while there are other later texts that were written to renegotiate and mask that early commandment, there are texts like Ezekiel 20, verses 25 and 26 that acknowledge that was precisely what the commandment was for. And that reading is the overwhelming academic consensus.
And who was Asherah? The goddess of sex.
Also pure and utter nonsense, Asherah was a mother deity, and so they had purview over a variety of different facets of motherhood, including child conception, childbearing, and child rearing.
And they would worship Asherah through orgies and unbridled sexual escapades.
There are no data that support this. This sounds an awful lot like something someone just made up.
Which 9 months later results in an unwanted baby, which you then pass through the fire to Baal.
So there are no data that support the assertion that sacrificed children represented unwanted pregnancies, and particularly that they were the product of cult orgies. Now, children who were sacrificed were probably costly attempts to secure specific blessings from certain deities, and because infant mortality rates exceeded 50% in these time periods, the likelihood that they were going to survive into adulthood was low enough anyway that the cost-benefit analysis would have been quite different for parents anciently than today. Now, I've shared them recently, but here again are some good publications on child sacrifice in ancient Israel.
What if I told you the strategy has never changed?
You would be just as wrong.
What if I told you there's nothing new under the sun, and as it was in Judges 6, so it is today? Planned Parenthood and the spirit of the age and his acolytes have used the same Judges 6 strategy for decades. They push pornographic, sexually titillating material and curriculum onto young kids to break down their sexual and societal mores and standards, to reduce them to their most animalistic appetites so they can't govern themselves, so they'll have more sex, so that more unwanted babies will be produced, which you can then pass through the fires to Planned Parenthood today.
Well, that would be a profoundly ignorant and despicable conspiracy theory that would literally demonize a good chunk of the country and flatly ignore the fact that programs like Planned Parenthood exist precisely to help reduce rates of unwanted pregnancies, of STDs, of unprotected sex, and of all the problems that come with that. It would also ignore the data that indicate that increased religiosity correlates to increased rates of all those things. And that's likely because increased religiosity is usually associated with increased rhetoric regarding abstinence-only ideologies and regarding purity culture and modesty culture and a lot of other stigmas that are associated with sex, which are deployed not to address the sexual health or the well-being of the communities involved, but are deployed as tools of costly signaling and of boundary maintenance, which prioritizes their function as such tools and marginalizes and neglects sexual health and the well-being of the communities, and therefore significantly harms those communities, and particularly women, and particularly young women.
Gideon is facing the same culture war that we're facing today, that so many pastors refuse to engage on because I don't really do the culture war, I just preach the gospel. No, you preach a syncretist, cheap grace gospel to ensure that you don't lose any ties from the people in your congregation who you refuse to call to repentance.
And you blithely preach a profoundly ignorant brand of right-wing authoritarianism while studiously ignoring the harm that it demonstrably does because it is the most effective means of structuring power and values in your favor.
You go tear down that altar of baby sacrifice. How about that? How about then we'll have a conversation?
How about you grow up, get educated, and not call for violence over the pulpit?